Hello everyone, I cordially welcome you all to this video. In this video from Tutorials in Hand, we are going to discuss about a very small and tiny to-do app project which is made using React and Redux. So without any delay, let's get started. So as you can see on your screen that this is the project which we are going to make. It's very simple. So when the website loads up on your browser, you will see a input field, a button and the content area. Okay. So what the intuition behind this project? So the intuition behind this project is to clear your concepts regarding React and Redux. Okay. So in this input field, we can write some text, which is basically a task which we are thinking to finish. So I have a plan of watching movies. So I have written this task over here and I have clicked on this add button. So once I click on it, this task will appear over here. So suppose once the task is done, I can click on this green tick and it will vanish from here. Okay. So this is the very simple project which we are going to make. So without any delay, let's see the code. This is our React project. So if you are not from a React background or sure how to make a React project, we simply do that using the create React app toolchain. Okay. So create React app basically takes care of all the necessary settings and setups and bootstrap a simple React project for our use. So one thing you can notice in this project basically, that is we are using TypeScript over here. Okay. So if you use create React app directly, it will bootstrap your React project in JavaScript and not in TypeScript. So how do we do that? We write npx create React app, then the name of the app, that is here to-do app, and then hyphen hyphen template TypeScript. That basically helps us to create a React project using the TypeScript. Okay. So once the project is generated, you have all these files and folders set up. Now here we have created 3 directories or folders which you can say, namely the components, the interface and the Redux. This Redux folder contains all the logic written for our application to use the global state which is provided by Redux. Okay. So let's see first. So when we are starting to work with Redux, first of all what we have to do is, if you can see, we have to install this Redux.js toolkit and this React Redux. Without them, our Redux application won't work. So we have to write npm install React Redux space @redux.js/toolkit. So this will install these important dependencies in our project and then we can start working with Redux. So then we will create a folder in Redux, folder in our project with the name Redux, and inside it we have another folder named reducer and a file which is store.ts. So we will start our journey from here. In the store.ts, you can see I have imported configure store from Redux.js toolkit. Okay. So the first question is, what is configure store? So the configure store is an abstraction layer which is over the create store, which is provided by Redux by default. So it helps us to set up our store in such a way that it is not only efficient but also improves our performance. Okay. So improves the application performance. So when we create a store using configure store, we can specify a lot of fields. The most important of them is the reducer. So in the reducer, we can take up any reducer which we want, which will be utilized in our application. And we have another thing which is DevTools. So if you are not sure what DevTools are, DevTool is basically used to debug any Redux application over here. So we have used Redux DevTools Chrome extension over here to debug our application when it was being made. Okay. And we have our to-do reducer over here. So we have imported this to-do reducer from here. So inside this reducer, we have our to-do reducer. So let's go into the file and check what we have made. So in the to-do reducer, we have imported create slice from Redux.js toolkit. So now the question comes, what is create slice? So create slice in Redux is a higher order function that accepts an initial state and object name that contains all the reducer functions to manipulate the state. Here when I talk about state, I talk about this initial state which is by default, and generates actions creators and action types that correspond to the reducer and state. Okay. So if this thing sounds a little tricky or a bit buzzword, so what you can say is create slice helps us to create the reducers actions which we will use in our application to manipulate the Redux state, the global application Redux state. In the create slice, we have to specify a name of that slice. So we have given to do. We have to provide an initial state. So initial state, we have a count, that is number of tasks or the serial number which you can say. And we have a list which will basically store all our tasks that we have in our Redux store. Okay. Now you can see I have written I to do item array as an interface. So what is this I to do item? If I visit over here, you will see it is basically an interface which contains an ID field and a task field. Okay. So we have our initial state, and in the reducers field, we have two reducers written. One is the add to do and another one is the remove to do. So what it does? Add to do basically takes a state and the action. It increases the state count by 1 and it enters the latest task which has been assigned by the user into this list. Okay. And remove to do basically takes up the action and state and it removes that particular task from the field whose ID matches with the item ID which is present within this list. Okay. So one thing which you might have some doubt if you are a very beginner, that is what is the state, reducer and action. So state is basically the global default store which is provided by Redux. It basically helps us to store data which can be usable by our entire application. And here state basically symbolizes the current state of the application, and the initial state is basically this one, count set as 0 and list as a blank array. Okay. What are actions? Basically, one thing which you have to remember in Redux, we cannot directly manipulate the store or the data which is stored in store. We have to dispatch actions. Now, these actions actually tells how we want to manipulate the stored data, and sometimes the action do contain something which is known as a payload which contains some data. Okay, this data will be utilized when we will manipulate our stored data. And reducers are basically simple functions that will actually on the field manipulate the store. So basically store is something which we are going to manipulate, action is something which is telling how we want to manipulate, and reducer is something which actually helps us to manipulate the data. So always remember, reducers don't directly manipulate the state or update the state. It basically takes up the current state and action and returns a new state. Okay, that is why the name reducer, it reduces the previous state and the action to the current state. Okay, so this is what it is. Then we have exported this add to do and remove to do from to do slice dot actions. So as I already told, this create slice generates actions from the reducers directly. So this add to do and remove to do are basically the actions. And if you see in your dev tools, when we will dispatch these actions, you will directly be able to see this name. And we have also exported all these reducers as a whole. As you can see, export default to do slice dot reducer. Okay, so that it is. Now one thing which you might think, that how our application knows whether that store is provided or not, and this doubt is absolutely correct. Till now our application doesn't know what is stored. So to let our application know what is the store, we will go to the parent folder, and in this parent folder to do app, we have our index tsx. Here we have to provide the store. And how do we do that? First of all, we import the store from the given path, and we import provider from React Redux, and then we provide the store to our entire application. So if you are from React background, you know, when we provide something, where the place where we provide, all its child component can basically access that thing. It's very similar to your context API as well, if you are familiar. So we are providing this store. Now from within our application, we can use the store. Okay. So now our Redux setup is completely done, and we will be start working with the components. So first of all, we will understand how we add something to the Redux store. So when I open up the components, you will see three different directories: add, to do and to do item. Okay, so our first point is the add component. Basically, now this add component provides this top search bar and the button which you see here. Okay, this add component has a local state variable task and set task which are provided by the useState hook. So if you are not sure what useState hook basically helps us to have local state within our component. And this useState hook returns two things. One is the state variable, and another one is the method to update that state variable. Okay, and we use another hook which is provided by React Redux, namely useDispatch. Now this useDispatch hook it returns a dispatch object which actually helps us to dispatch the actions. Okay, so when this useDispatch returns dispatch, we will use this dispatch to dispatch any action. We have another method, dispatch add to do. Here we check if our local state variable task exists and it has a length greater than 4, then we dispatch this action. Otherwise, we alert the user that add some task to add this as a to do. Okay, it's basically to let the user know that this task which we have written is not something very correct as expected. So it not only should exist, but it should have a length greater than 4, because I personally believe no task can be written in less than 4 characters now. So that's what I believe. So now we have our container over here, and here we have an input type search which I have given, and we have a placeholder write a task, and on change event we are setting the task as its value. So whenever we are typing something, that thing will be updated in the local state variable. And once we click on this button add, see, we are calling this function dispatch add to do. Now this dispatch add to do, first we'll check if this task local state variable exists with a value, and if this value's length is greater than 4, then it will dispatch this add to do. Otherwise it will show the alert. Now the flow comes how this works. So when this component dispatches this add to do with the task, now here task is basically a string. Okay, so you have to see the reducer then. In the reducer add to do, action is present. What it will do, it will increase the count, that is the serial number by 1, and then it will update the state by providing the increased count as the ID and the task as the payload which has been sent. And what is the payload? The payload is basically the task which you are sending, the string value which the user has typed in the input field. Okay, and then this gets added to your state variable. Now here you might think that we are directly pushing an object into the store, basically directly mutating it, which is actually not good as per the Redux principle. But don't worry, Redux toolkits internally takes care of that. It updates the store in an immutable way, even though we have written like this. Okay, so this is how we actually add something to our Redux store. And now it's time we fetch data from the Redux store and see what has been already added. So now we will come to this to do component, and here we will see in this to do container component, first of all we have used this use selector hook from React Redux to take a slice of the data stored in the global application state. So what are use selector? Use selector basically you can comprehend as of now. It basically has a hook provided by React Redux which is used to take a slice of the state which we are interested in to work in our component. And also we have to do activities and set to do activities, that is the local state variable, and the method to update the local state variable which is provided by the useState hook. And we also have a use effect such that anytime this list changes, it will re-render our component such that our new item which has been added to the Redux store is displayed on our UI. Okay, one thing you might have a slight confusion that why I have written the use effect like this. So the concept is, suppose I have added a task into our Redux store. Okay, once I have added the task, so we are using this list to get a slice of that task. Now this list will have the updated task from the previous. So previously suppose there were 3 tasks. Currently after I have added one, there are now 4 tasks. So this list will change, and use effect second argument is basically a dependency. So once the dependency changes, it will set up the local state variable with the current list, so that this will be changed, and once this is changed, our re-render cycle is going to trigger. Okay. Now currently you can comprehend that all our tasks which have been added in the store is present in this to do activities. Now what I have done, I am checking using ternary operator whether this activities is there, and whether the length of the activity, which is basically an array, is greater than 0, that is some item is present. Then I am iterating over the activities, and I am returning a new component and passing the data of the task as props. Okay, and if nothing is present, I am showing nothing to display. Here always remember, when you are rendering something within a loop, you always need to use key. Okay, and key has to be used to actually React know when to update, what to update, and how to update in such a way that it is the most efficient behavior. If you don't write key, you will get an error message in the browser console that this has to be there. And always try to avoid index as keys, because it is a big anti-pattern which actually messes up with your application performance. Okay. So now let's see this to do item. So once I go into this to do item, you will see this is what it is. In this to do item, we are accepting ID and task as props. Okay, and we are rendering that task on the browser. Again, we have created an dispatch from the use dispatch hook, and here in this done button and remove button, in both of the cases I am removing the particular task from the Redux store, and I am passing the ID as payload. Now once the remove to do is dispatched with some ID, how does that work? Basically, let's again go to the reducer file. So once this remove to do action is called, it returns the state.list. We filter items from the list such that item.id should not match with the action.payload. So it will return all the tasks apart from that particular task whose ID we have passed from over here. Okay. Now one thing you might ask, that why I have used memo over here. So React memo is used for optimization purpose. So when you pass some data from parent to child component, sometimes it so happens even when the prop data is not changed, the child component re-renders. This actually reduces the efficiency of your application. So when you wrap with memo, basically we use a memoized version of the component such that until and unless the props are changed, this child component won't re-render. And in mainly we use memo for bigger applications where we have a lot of heavy lifting. Currently this is very small, and you might think it is unnecessary to use it, because even we are not passing any method, which is actually the culprit for triggering child application. But I have kept space such that in future, if we update the project, and if as a viewer you are thinking to make this project in your own system and utilize it, so you will be able to scale this project and add far more features to use it and show it in your CV. Okay, so this is our project what we have made, and I hope you like this video. So in case you have any doubt, feel free to write it in the comment section, and if you have found this video very informative, please like the video, subscribe the channel, and share it with your friends who can be benefited by this video. And that's it for now. See you in the next video. Bye.